the CPD Source, your one-stop shop for budget-friendly CPD. In this episode, we talk about cybersecurity. While you may be familiar with viruses, spyware, and Trojan horses from the previous decade, things have evolved since then. Defense mechanisms may have improved, but the cybercriminals have also upped their game. After today's discussion, you will be able to identify some of the top cybersecurity threats today and recognize best practices to protect yourself and your organization. But before we talk about cybersecurity threats, we have to start with the concept of social engineering. Social engineering refers to the act of exploiting or manipulating human psychology and natural tendencies in order to obtain information or the associated accesses and privileges. So, what does this actually mean? As a notable and recent example, there has been an increase in the number of fraudulent calls from the tax department, suggesting that one is behind on tax payments and subsequently requiring a variety of personal information to be shared or payment-related tasks to be performed in order to discharge the amounts owed. Another common example is the perpetrator who kindly requests to tailgate through the office doors with you, claiming to be an employee who simply left their office pass at home in a rush this morning. So, even if you hadn't been familiar with the term social engineering, chances are that you have encountered it at least once in recent years. At this point, perhaps you may be asking, why are we talking about social engineering? Wasn't this episode about cybersecurity threats? Well, it turns out that a number of cybersecurity threats are actually forms of social engineering attacks, and it is important to set out the context before diving into the threat itself. To read more about social engineering and social engineering attacks, please access the links provided in the description below. Without further ado, let's begin and talk about cybersecurity threats. Phishing. Phishing is a form of social engineering and typically takes the form of mass emails being sent by scammers to potential victims. In the phishing scenario, the email purposely appears to originate from a legitimate organization, such as a financial institution, a government body, or even a local supermarket chain. Typically, the email is formatted in a manner that replicates the organization's style, such as logos, banners, font size, language, and even tone. It may even be sent from an email address that appears to be affiliated with the organization in question, even though in reality it is not. As a generalization, phishing emails usually read something like this. The recipient's account with a particular organization has been frozen due to inactivity or suspicious activity. Alternatively, the recipient's account details with a particular organization have been lost. In order to reactivate or retrieve their account, one will need to click on the links provided and re-input their account details. As the recipient re-inputs their access details via the link provided, little do they know that they are actually inputting their access details onto the scammer's webpage. At this point, the scammer has everything they need in order to access and use the victim's account. Variations of the phishing scam exist. Instead of asking the victim to input account details, the link may also trigger the download of malicious software onto the victim's device. More on that later. While the above describes a personal phishing scam, phishing scams are also known to target organizations and their employees. In this situation, the emails appear to have originated from within the organization, such as human resources. The email may describe the rollout of new surveys, programs, and initiatives within the organization, asking that employees find out more by clicking on the links provided. Scammers are also known to keep up with the times. Recently, there has also been an increase in the number of phishing emails under the guise of COVID-related updates and initiatives. Spear-Phishing. While phishing scams are typically sent to hundreds or even thousands of recipients, spear-phishing is a form of phishing that targets specific individuals or organizations. With a regular phishing scam, it may be relatively easy to detect, especially if it appears to be from an organization with which one is not affiliated or has no transactions. However, spear phishing emails may be a bit more sophisticated. Knowing their target well enough, these emails typically reference specific affiliations, relationships, or even transactions, and request that their target act upon them. Spear phishing can be found at both the personal and the organizational level. For example, scammers may email the accounts payable department of specific organizations, issuing invoices and requesting payments under the guise of legitimate vendors. Organizations and individuals that don't perform adequate due diligence will fall prey to spear phishing scams. In order to protect yourself and your organization, it is important to first question the origin of emails with such specific links and requests. Here, we have compiled a short list of questions that you can ask yourself. 1. Do I, or does my company, have dealings with this organization? If the answer is no, then it is likely a phishing scam. Notably, some government bodies and organizations have made it clear that they do not send email notifications at all. If an email alleges to have come from such bodies, then it is likely a phishing attempt. 2. If I, or my company, deals with this organization, how should I confirm the legitimacy of the email? Prior to taking action or clicking on the links provided in the email, one can corroborate the context with the counterparty. Consider reaching out to a familiar representative at the counterparty or contacting them via information on their website. Do not rely on the contact information provided in the email. 3. Are there other red flags that point to an email being a phishing scam? While phishing scammers have made great efforts in mimicking legitimate organizations, there's usually some extent of imperfection with their emails that can be detected. For example, images may be grainy, suggesting that they may have been copied from elsewhere. Logo size and placement are not in line with the organization's regular communications. The language reads in a funny manner and contains grammatical and syntax errors. The required actions are not in line with the organization's communications or operations. Another way to spot a potential phishing scam is to take a look at the sender's email address. Take these examples from Amazon Prime and Costco. As you can see, the email addresses and domains in question are an incoherent mix of words and letters, not typical nor likely of the respective organizations. Similarly, one can also hover over but not click on the links. In some cases, your web browser may display the underlying web address in the lower left corner of your screen. Again, the same style of incoherent words and letters may be found in the underlying URL. 4. How do I treat phishing emails? Simply put, do not click on the links or take action as requested. Some email service providers allow you the option of flagging emails as junk or phishing scams. Otherwise, simply delete the email. In an organizational setting, if possible, one may report the phishing attempt to the IT department so that the rest of the organization can be made aware. To read more about phishing and spear phishing, please access the links provided in the description below. Malware. The term malware is a portmanteau of the words malicious and software, and is exactly what it sounds like. Malware is a general term for software intended to cause harm and damage to computers, networks, and servers. They find their way into devices by way of malicious websites, infected attachments, and even phishing, as we described earlier. While the terms malware and computer virus are often used interchangeably, in reality, however, a computer virus is just one type of malware. So what are some other types of malware? Trojan horse. Generally speaking, while a Trojan horse does not harm a computing device per se, Trojan horses have the ability to open a backdoor on computing devices, providing the hacker with unwarranted access and controls. Ransomware. A notable form of malware that gained prominence in the past decade is ransomware. As the name suggests, it locks users out of their computing devices and prevents access to data and information until a ransom is paid. Many times, attackers request that the ransom be paid via a form of digital currency, given the difficulty in tracing payment and sources. If payment is not received by the due date, the attacker will wipe the device and delete all the data. Some sectors and industries are especially prone to ransomware attacks. For example, medical organizations with large amounts of patient data, or banks with large amounts of client information and balances. But why is that? Well, in these cases, attackers expect the organizations to value their data highly. Therefore, they are more likely to pay the ransom and avoid further trouble. While no method can ever be 100% safe, the following are high-level methods to reduce the likelihood of malware attacks. 1. Ensure that virus and network security protection is in place and up to date. Again, while not necessarily 100% safe, this acts as a first line of defense against attackers. 2. Avoid opening and acting upon potential phishing scams and emails. As previously alluded to, malware may be included with phishing scams and emails. Delete potential phishing emails and notify the IT team if applicable. 3. Backup data. Ensure that data is backed up on a regular basis, including the use of cloud services. By doing so, this may reduce the threat brought upon yourself or your organization by ransomware. To read more about ransomware, please access the links provided in the description below. Denial of service attack. Also referred to as a DOS attack, a denial of service attack involves overloading a server's or website's resources to the point that it stops working for legitimate users. There are two subtypes of DOS attacks: the flood attack and the crash attack. The flood attack is more common and involves overwhelming a server with excessive traffic until it slows down and stops working. The crash attack involves exploiting flaws, bugs, and vulnerabilities in the targeted system to destabilize it. A variation of the DOS attack is known as the distributed denial of service attack. In this situation, multiple attacking systems take part in a synchronized DOS attack on the same target. Preventing a DOS attack from happening is a difficult task. However, the earlier you detect them, the quicker you can stop them. While detecting an attack is a fairly technical task best left to technical experts, it is still important to recognize the signs that an attack may be happening. These may include abnormally slow network speeds, web pages being unavailable, as well as web pages being inaccessible. To read more about denial of service attacks, please access the links provided in the description below. Man-in-the-middle attack. A man-in-the-middle attack happens when a cybercriminal intercepts communications or interactions between the victim and the legitimate source. The purpose of such attacks is to steal personal information, login or account information, spy on the victim, as well as to gain control of and sabotage networks and systems. Typically, the cybercriminal starts by looking for and taking advantage of poorly secured or unsecured Wi-Fi networks. Once in the network, the cybercriminal deploys various tools to intercept data and also place themselves within the interactions. The cybercriminal tricks the devices on the network into thinking that they are interacting with legitimate sources and parties in a manner that is somewhat relatable to the phishing scams that we talked about earlier. At this point, the victim may be transacting with or inputting sensitive information into seemingly legitimate sources, but unbeknownst to the victim, these counterparties are actually created and controlled by the cybercriminal. As these interactions continue, their personal information and login credentials will be logged by the cybercriminal. To protect yourself from a man-in-the-middle attack, it is important to ensure that your Wi-Fi networks are adequately secured. If possible, avoid connecting to public Wi-Fi networks. If absolutely necessary, utilize discretion in the types of online interactions you partake in. Also consider utilizing a VPN encryption. To read more about man-in-the-middle attacks, please access the links provided in the description below. At this point, you may be asking as to why perpetrators carry out their attacks. While financial gain is usually the first and foremost incentive, occasionally, there are political and espionage-related motives as well. The latter usually results in larger scale and more sophisticated attacks. While no solution can ever be 100% safe, here are some best practices for you and your organization to consider. Hopefully, these can reduce the chances of or the impact of an attack. 1. Ensure that antivirus software and internet security patches are up to date. Cybercriminals and their tactics are constantly evolving, and it is important for your devices to react appropriately to them. 2. Ensure that Wi-Fi networks are protected. By protecting Wi-Fi networks, this reduces the risk of man-in-the-middle attacks. 3. Consider using a virtual private network, VPN. While there are other benefits and reasons for using a VPN also adds an additional layer of encryption for data transfer, hence adding one more layer of defense. 4. Corroborate and confirm when dealing with suspicious emails. Given the frequency and sophistication of phishing scams, always confirm its authenticity when encountering a suspicious email. Do not click on the embedded links or input information as told. 5. Backup important data. To address the risk of data loss associated with malware or denial of service attacks, it is important to back up important data on a regular basis. Consider the use of both physical servers as well as cloud storage services. To read more about cybersecurity protection, please access the links provided in the description below. In closing, we hope you enjoyed this session about cybersecurity. Hopefully, you will be able to identify some of the top cybersecurity threats today and recognize best practices to protect yourself and your organization. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. To earn verifiable CPD hours, simply access our quiz via the link in the description. Purchase and complete the quiz and earn a certificate for a verifiable CPD. For questions, comments, and suggestions, email us at thecpdsource@gmail.com.